It's June 30th, 1944. The war in the Pacific has entered its deadliest year. Allied bombers pound island after island, while Japan refuses to yield an inch. The sun has long set over the humid skies of Saipan, but the night is far from quiet. Far above the restless soldiers below, a strange silhouette moves through the darkness, twin engines whispering, black paint glimmering faintly under moonlight. It carries no formation lights, no shining markings, no hint of color. It looks like a shadow given wings. To those on the ground, it seems almost supernatural. But it isn't a ghost. It's the U.S. Army Air Force's newest and most secret weapon, the P-61 Black Widow. That night, the Widow is flying its very first combat mission. Inside the cockpit sit three men: a pilot, a radar operator, and a gunner, each doing something never before attempted in aerial warfare. They are hunting another aircraft in total darkness, guided not by eyes, but by invisible radio waves bouncing off the sky. Somewhere ahead, an enemy bomber is returning to base. Its crew feels safe. The night has always been their shield. But this time, something else is up there with them, something built to see in the dark. Moments later, the radar operator speaks. Contact, range 3 miles, closing fast. The pilot pushes forward on the throttles. The massive twin engines roar. The blip on the radar screen grows larger. Then, just for a moment, a faint shadow crosses the stars. The pilot squeezes the trigger. A burst of 20mm shells tear through the night. The sky flashes. The enemy bomber explodes. And just like that, a new kind of air combat begins. Only a few years earlier, the idea of a night fighter seemed absurd. Before radar, air combat was ruled by light. You fought what you could see, and when the sun set, the war went quiet. That all changed in 1940 during the Blitz over Britain. German bombers filled the night sky, raining destruction over London, Coventry, and countless other cities. The British defenders had early radar to detect them, but once the bombers crossed the coastline, tracking them became chaos. Pilots scrambled blindly into the night, guided by ground controllers who could only estimate where to send them. Some tried flying into searchlights, hoping to catch a glimpse of a bomber's silhouette before firing. It worked occasionally, but it was like trying to catch lightning with your hands. The British began experimenting with airborne radar, installing bulky sets on twin-engine fighters like the Beaufighter and later the Mosquito. It was primitive, but it worked, and for the first time, aircraft could hunt in total darkness. Across the Atlantic, the Americans watched closely, but they didn't see the point. The U.S. Army Air Corps, as it was still called, believed radar-guided night fighting was a sideshow. "We'll win in the daytime," they said. "We have the numbers, the training, the machines." Then came the Pacific. In 1942, Japanese bombers began striking American bases at night. At Henderson Field, Guadalcanal, and New Guinea, alarms screamed through the darkness as bombs fell on sleeping soldiers. Searchlights stabbed the sky, anti-aircraft guns blazed, and hit nothing. The U.S. tried improvising. Pilots flew P-38 Lightnings and P-70 Havocs with searchlights strapped under their noses. Some even carried handheld flashlights to illuminate targets. It was desperate, dangerous, and mostly useless. The enemy would vanish before the defenders even found them. It became clear. The Americans needed a true night fighter, designed from the ground up for the job. One that could fly far, stay up for hours, and detect its prey in total darkness. In early 1941, the Air Corps sent out a proposal. Most aircraft manufacturers ignored it. But one man didn't: Jack Northrop. Northrop's company was still small then, more known for futuristic prototypes than production aircraft. But Jack Northrop had a reputation for two things: bold ideas and meticulous engineering. When he read the night fighter specification, he saw something bigger than a new airplane. He saw a challenge. He wrote to the Air Corps, "If the enemy hides in darkness, then we'll build a machine that lives there." His engineers began sketching what would become Project N8, later known as the XB-61. From day one, it broke every rule in aviation design. Most fighters were small and agile. The XB-61 would be large, almost bomber-sized. It would have twin booms like the P-38, with a central crew pod housing 3 men, a pilot, a gunner, and a radar operator. Its heart would be a radar system unlike anything yet flown. The SCR-720, capable of detecting aircraft up to 5 miles away, day or night, in any weather. And it would be armed to the teeth. 4 20mm cannons under the fuselage, and 4.50 caliber machine guns mounted in a remote-controlled dorsal turret. It wasn't beautiful, but it was menacing. When the prototype rolled out of the Northrop hangar in 1942, the test pilots joked it looked like a spider that could fly. The name stuck, Black Widow. Testing the Widow was unlike testing any other aircraft. The engines, 2 massive Pratt & Whitney R2800s, gave it brute power but also heavy handling. The radar system, meanwhile, was cutting-edge and temperamental. A few flights ended with smoke pouring out of the electronics bay as the radar overheated. Pilots had to learn to work with their radar operators, a completely new concept in air combat. Instead of scanning the skies themselves, they trusted a voice in their headset calling out distances and directions. Left 5 degrees, target descending, range 1 mile. For many, that felt unnatural, even dangerous. Fighter pilots were used to relying on instinct and eyesight, not on a man looking at a glowing screen. But gradually, the teams began to click. The radar operators learned how to filter false echoes from real aircraft. The pilots learned to trust the numbers. By late 1943, the Widow was finally ready for war. The Air Corps ordered more than 500 units, an enormous number for a type that barely existed before. Yet doubts persisted. Some commanders called it too big to fight. Others argued the British Mosquito was already good enough. Even within Northrop, engineers worried that the radar system would fail in the humid Pacific climate. Still, by mid-1944, the first squadrons were sent into combat. Their destination, the Mariana Islands, and from there, the heart of Japan's air network. That first mission on June 30, 1944, proved what the Widow could do. 1 radar contact, 1 attack, 1 confirmed kill. From that moment on, the Widow's legend began to spread. Crews said the aircraft felt alive, that once it locked onto a target, it seemed to hunt on its own. Its black paint swallowed moonlight. Its engines purred quietly compared to the roar of most twin-engine aircraft. And when it attacked, it struck without warning, 4 20mm cannons tearing through the night, leaving nothing behind but silence. That first victory wasn't just a success. It was a signal. The age of radar warfare had begun. And with it, the world's first true night fighter had taken its place in history. But the Widow's story was only beginning. Ahead lay its toughest battles, over the jungles of the Pacific, the dark skies of France, and the fog of the Ardennes. It would hunt bombers, duel with German night fighters, and witness the birth of the jet age that would soon make it obsolete. Yet for a brief, extraordinary moment in history, it was the most advanced combat aircraft in the world. The machine that taught men to see in the dark, the P-61 Black Widow. By the end of 1944, the war had changed, but the night still belonged to the Widow. Across the Pacific, in places with names that sounded like curses, Saipan, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, the P-61 became the invisible guardian of sleeping soldiers. Each night, they launched into pitch-black skies, guided only by radar and instinct. The Japanese attacks were unpredictable, small groups of bombers, nicknamed Washing Machine Charlie, who flew over American positions just to drop a few bombs and keep everyone awake. It wasn't the damage that mattered, it was the psychological toll, sleep deprivation, fear of the unseen. But then came the Black Widow. Once it was airborne, silence returned to the camps below. Soldiers said they could finally sleep again because Charlie didn't come back when the Widow was up. A Widow mission always began the same way. The crew gathered around their aircraft, checking the black-painted fuselage under dim red lights. The radar operator would test the SCR-720 system, calibrating it carefully, a process that could take an hour. The pilot would check fuel lines, hydraulics, ammunition, and the turret system. Then the engines roared to life, two Pratt and Whitney double Wasps, each producing over 2,000 horsepower. The entire airfield trembled as the Widow lifted into the night. The pilot could see almost nothing, just the faint red glow of instruments and a black horizon. The radar operator guided him step by step. Climb to 12,000 feet. Turn bearing 180. Contact expected 10 miles east. In total darkness, the Widow hunted silently, its radar sending invisible pulses into the void. When a target appeared on the scope, the radar operator's voice changed, calm but electric. Contact, range 8 miles closing. The pilot adjusted course. At 5 miles, the operator refined the readings. Target descending slightly, slow speed, probably a bomber. At 2 miles, the gunner armed the cannons. And then, for the first time, the pilot might actually see the target, a faint shadow against starlight, or the red glow of exhaust stacks. Visual, he whispered. A moment later, tracer fire cut through the night. The Widow was heavy, but deadly stable. Its 420 cannons under the fuselage could rip apart a bomber in seconds, and the remote turret added even more flexibility. In the Pacific, the Widow's favorite prey were Mitsubishi G4M, Betty, bombers, fast, long-range aircraft used by Japan for night harassment. The G4Ms had no armor and carried huge fuel tanks, earning them the nickname Flying Lighters. When a Widow caught one, the result was always the same: a few short bursts, a flash of fire, and then darkness again. One night, Captain Harold August and his radar operator, Lieutenant Glenn Reith, intercepted a formation of 3 G4Ms near Saipan. They closed in from below, using radar guidance until they saw the faint silhouette of the last bomber. August opened fire. The Betty exploded mid-air. Seconds later, they lined up another burst, another kill. By the time they returned to base, the squadron radio was already alive with reports. Widow 1 just bagged 2 Charlies. It wasn't just the first double kill for a P-61. It was proof that radar interception could truly dominate the night. In Europe, the Widow's war was different, colder, harsher, and more crowded. By late 1944, the Luftwaffe had its own deadly night fighters, Bf-110s and Ju-88s, guided by ground radar and infrared sensors. The skies over France and Belgium became a ghostly chessboard, with both sides blindfolded and armed. The 422nd and 425th Night Fighter Squadrons flew the Widow from bases in England and France, protecting bombers and ground troops alike. During the Battle of the Bulge, December 1944, the nights were freezing, fog-choked, and unpredictable. While the Allies struggled to see anything through the mist, the P-61's radar turned that same fog into an advantage. Lieutenant Hermann Ernst and his radar operator, Lieutenant Edward Kopsel, became one of the most successful pairs in the theater. They described the experience as like stalking ghosts with a flashlight no one else could see. On December 23, 1944, they tracked a German Ju-87 Stuka retreating through the Ardennes. The radar locked on. The crew closed to within 600 feet before the pilot could even react. One short burst, and the Stuka disappeared into the forest below. That kill marked the Widow's first confirmed victory over Europe, and the beginning of a long, silent hunt across the continent. The aircraft's psychological impact was enormous. German pilots began reporting encounters with black twin-boom demons that appeared out of nowhere. Some Luftwaffe crews refused to fly night raids when P-61s were known to be in the area. The Widow didn't always need to shoot. Sometimes, its mere presence was enough. A German bomber pilot captured after the war described the experience. "We never saw it. Only the radar warning light flashed, and then everything went white. It was like being struck by lightning." The P-61 was terrifying because it erased one of the oldest rules of warfare, that night belonged to the brave and unseen. Now darkness itself had turned against its former masters. Still, the Widow wasn't perfect. It was large, complex, and maintenance-heavy. Its range and endurance were excellent, but its speed lagged behind newer fighters. Pilots loved its stability and firepower, but not its sluggish roll rate. Yet despite its flaws, it was reliable. It could absorb damage that would destroy lighter aircraft. Its crew of 3 worked in perfect harmony, the pilot trusting the radar operator, the gunner ready to fire blind if needed. Each successful intercept reinforced their confidence in radar, a technology that, just a few years earlier, many officers had dismissed as science fiction. The Widow had proven them wrong. As the war turned in the Allies' favor, the Widow's missions expanded. In the Pacific, it began escorting B-29 superfortresses, protecting them from Japanese night fighters over Tokyo and Nagoya. In Europe, it hunted V-1 flying bombs, the world's first cruise missiles, shooting them down in the dark before they could reach London. Some crews began calling it the Angel in the Shadows. In the words of one pilot, "When the sun went down, we owned the sky." By mid-1945, the Widow was flying missions deeper into enemy territory than ever before. From Saipan and Iwo Jima, they chased Japanese aircraft all the way to the mainland. Radar operators often described eerie moments where they saw dozens of returns on their screens, all decoys or false echoes, and had to guess which one was real. Even in the final days of the war, the Widow's missions remained dangerous. On August 14, 1945, the night before Japan's surrender, a P-61 named Lady in the Dark intercepted a Nakajima Ki-44 fighter near Aishima. The American pilot, Lieutenant Robert W. Clyde, fired a burst that damaged the Japanese aircraft, which then dove into the sea. That engagement is considered the final aerial victory of World War II, and it was achieved by a Black Widow. By then, the world had entered a new era. Jet engines were arriving. The Me-262 in Germany and P-80 Shooting Star in the U.S. were rewriting the laws of speed and flight. The P-61, for all its brilliance, was already a relic of the propeller age, a masterpiece born too late to dominate for long. But its legacy couldn't be ignored. It had pioneered airborne radar warfare, proven the power of crew coordination, and inspired a generation of night and all-weather fighters that would define the Cold War. The Widow had hunted through the darkest skies in human history and never failed to bring its crew home. As one veteran put it years later, the P-61 wasn't the fastest or the prettiest or the easiest to fly. But when you saw that black wing in the moonlight, you knew one thing: the night wasn't yours anymore. The war ended not with a battle but with a sound, a deep, echoing silence that rolled across the Pacific in August 1945. The guns stopped, the sirens went quiet, and in the stillness, the Widow, the plane that had hunted through darkness, finally had no one left to chase. Across airfields in Saipan, Guam, and Okinawa, rows of P-61s sat quietly under the tropical sun. Their engines were cold, their radar sets covered with canvas. For the first time in years, the crews slept through the night. But peace can be cruel to machines built for war. The Black Widow had proven itself in every theater of the conflict: Pacific, Europe, China. Yet by 1946, the U.S. Army Air Forces began phasing it out. The reason wasn't failure, it was progress. Jet propulsion had arrived, and it was changing everything faster than any general or engineer could predict. The first generation of jet aircraft, the German Me-262, the British Gloster Meteor, and the American P-80 Shooting Star, made even the fastest piston planes look like antiques overnight. The P-61, with its heavy frame and propellers, simply couldn't compete. It had been designed to intercept bombers at 350 miles per hour. The new jets flew at over 500. The Widow's radar was revolutionary but bulky and fragile, not suited for the slim, swept-wing designs that were now emerging. In just a year, the plane that had been cutting-edge became obsolete. The U.S. tried to adapt. Engineers proposed upgraded variants. The P-61C, with turbo-superchargers and higher speed, and the F-15 Reporter, a reconnaissance version stripped of weapons and fitted with cameras. But even those came too late. By the time the Reporter entered service, the military was already investing in jet-powered night fighters like the F-82 Twin Mustang, and later the F-94 Starfire. The Widow was retired quietly, without ceremony, without a farewell flyover. Many were scrapped, melted down for metal, or abandoned on distant Pacific airstrips. For a time, it seemed the world had forgotten the aircraft that had once ruled the night. But not everyone forgot. Among the crews who flew her, the Widow left deep loyalty and deeper awe. They called her temperamental, heavy, even haunted. But they also called her safe. Pilots said she handled like a truck, but a truck that could take you home. Radar operators trusted her systems more than any human lookout. And every crewman knew, if you were in trouble, the Widow would get you back, no matter how dark it was. In the years after the war, a few surviving Widows found new purposes. Some became test platforms for radar experiments during the early Cold War. Others were converted into civilian aircraft for weather research and aerial photography. One, painted white and fitted with scientific instruments, flew deep into storm systems for the U.S. Weather Bureau, earning it a new nickname, the Storm Widow. But for most, their fate was quieter, forgotten hulks sitting at the edges of airfields, scavenged for parts until nothing remained but a bare frame. By the 1950s, the Widow had nearly vanished from the skies altogether. And yet, something remarkable happened. Historians and aviation enthusiasts began rediscovering it, not as just another wartime machine, but as a turning point in technological evolution. They realized the P-61 wasn't simply an aircraft. It was the missing link, the bridge between the propeller age and the digital warfare that would follow. Its radar, primitive by today's standards, was the ancestor of every airborne early warning and night interception system that exists now. Its multi-crew coordination became the blueprint for fighter-bomber teams that would dominate Korea and Vietnam. Even the concept of all-weather interceptors, which defined Cold War defense doctrine, began with the Widow's black wings. Despite that legacy, few physical examples survived. Out of more than 700 built, only 4 complete P-61s exist today. Each has its own improbable story of survival. One, nicknamed Moonlight Serenade, was recovered from the Philippines jungle in the 1980s, where it had crash-landed decades earlier. Restoration teams spent years painstakingly rebuilding it, a process that took longer than the war itself. Another sits today in the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum, restored to factory condition, a silent monument to a machine that once stalked the world's darkest skies. The most famous restoration, however, belongs to Midnight Belle, found half-buried in the jungles of New Guinea. Volunteers spent decades bringing her back to life, culminating in a flight in 2022, the first P-61 to fly in over 70 years. When her engines roared back to life, aviation enthusiasts said it felt like hearing a ghost speak. The irony of the Widow's story is that it was too advanced for its own time. When it entered service in 1944, few pilots understood radar tactics. When the rest of the world caught up, the Widow was already obsolete. It lived in the narrow gap between two revolutions, born at the end of one era, dying at the beginning of another. And yet, for those who truly study its history, it represents something far greater than just an aircraft. It represents the birth of the invisible battlefield, the moment when war moved from what the eye could see to what technology could detect. In that sense, the P-61 wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning of everything that came after: the AWACS planes, the stealth fighters, the night vision systems, the data-linked warfare of today. Every F-22 Raptor, Every B-2 Spirit, every invisible weapon that flies through modern skies owes something to the first aircraft that mastered the dark. And all of them, in a way, carry its spirit. One former radar operator once said, "We flew into nothingness every night. No stars, no sound, just the green glow of the scope. But when that blip appeared, when we closed in and saw the flash, that was the moment you realized we weren't fighting the enemy. We were fighting the dark." The Widow didn't just win battles. It taught humanity how to fight in a world it could no longer see. When the last P-61 shut down its engines, it marked the end of a strange and beautiful chapter in aviation history. When courage met technology, and darkness became the battlefield. The world moved on, but the Widow never truly left. Its legacy still lingers in every radar pulse, every stealth mission, every night patrol that takes off without needing to see its target. The Widow still flies not in the sky but in the very way we wage war. And somewhere in a hangar or a museum, a black-winged giant waits under the lights, quiet, patient, watching, because once long ago the night was its kingdom. And maybe, just maybe, it still is.